May go Vanen, everybody, and welcome back to another stream and another session of the Ranger Reading series, which has been going strong for a few weeks now, and I'm actually really enjoying this, so, yeah. I think we're going to keep this going. But, yeah, we're going to be jumping into more of our Bible reading today, which we are currently starting a series reading through the book of Genesis. And then once we are done with that, we will be reading the Tales of Heavensward, but novelized in the Encyclopedia Eorzea, Volume 1. I'm really excited for that. So, yeah, really excited. Which I will start prepping that now. Obviously, I'm in my VTuber form, but that will be the last you see of me in this form because we'll be using webcam for the rest of the stream. Yippee! But yeah, so let me also catch up on chat. Hello to Wolfie and Anding. I hope you both are doing well today. What do I use to display the songs on stream? I use a plugin that I found from another creator on well, X, and now it's called, used to be Twitter. I can send you the link after stream, Andang, if you want to see it. It took a bit to figure out how to set up, but once I set it up, it was like, oh, yeah, that's worth it. It's very useful. Very useful. But, so, without further ado, we'll be getting this all set up and ready, so stand by, everybody, as I get this set up, and hopefully I remember how to do this correctly this time. Hold on! Okay, stand by. Also, the good news for both of you, if you set it up and you have issues, I definitely had issues setting it up as well, so I can always help both of you if and when you get to that point. Okay, close VTube Studio. Then we turn this on. And we should have activation. We do! Look at that. Look at that. We have activation. But it is a little crooked. Let me see if I can fix that. If I bring you over here. It's a little better. He's slightly crooked. It's fine. You guys can still see the book, which is the most important thing. We got here the 1599 Geneva Bible, still my favorite version of the Bible, because it's the first version, not the King James. This was before the King James, and it was the one that all our founding fathers here in the U.S. used, and that's why I love it. But yes. So we're going to be reading this, and then we'll be jumping into the next book, which will be this, the Encyclopedia Eorzea Volume 1. So yeah, more reading. I love my reading. I've always said I'm one of those people that if the internet went down, at least I'd still have my books. I do love my books, and I have a bad habit of buying more books than I'll ever read. But yes, which is why I have 3 full bookshelves in my actual room right now, because I am addicted to buying books. But yeah, also the most recent book I actually finished was The Silmarillion, so take with that what you will. But anyway, we will start reading here in a second. If elves are on shelves, are rangers on mangers? The question of the hour. There's no I in team and there's no kit. What are you on, Anding? Right into the cliff, stretched arms of... Oh, my goodness. My goodness, Andang. I have no words. You're nomming on tacos? Nice, Alpha. Nice. I approve. Well, while you are nomming on your tacos, I will be reading. So, like I said, everybody, first, we read the next chapter of the book of Genesis in our 1599 Geneva Bible, and then we jump into Encyclopedia Eorzea, Volume 1. Where we were last leaving off on that, which is in the Heavensward chapter, which is why I played a certain song at the beginning of the stream. But yeah, anyway, without further ado, we shall begin. So everyone get comfortable, sit back, drink a cup of coffee or whatever you drink, or munch on some tacos, and hopefully my reading skills will be up to par today. Or you can all laugh at me either way. But anyway, here we go. Genesis chapter 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And then the seventh day God ended his work which he had made. And the seventh day he rested from all his work which he had made. So God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth, when they were created in that day, that the Lord God made the heaven and the earth, and every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, neither was there a man to till the ground. But a mist went up from the earth, and watered all the earth. The Lord God also made the man of the dust of the ground, and breathed in his face breath of life, and man was a living soul. And God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had made. For out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree pleasant to the sight, and good for meat, the trees of life also in the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. How is this episode 4, but we are on chapter 2? Very simple reason. The first time we did one of these ranger readings, I read my favorite chapter in the entire Bible, which is also from the book I was named after. And that was the first ranger reading episode, and then the second one was around Christmas, so we read the Christmas story, and then last episode we read Genesis chapter 1. Now we're on Genesis chapter 2. So because Genesis is one of my favorite books, and it is, not gonna lie, studying Genesis was one of the reasons I am even a Christian. Because I am also a science nerd in real life, and back in high school, let's just say I did some scientific research on the whole evolution versus biblical creation debate. And yeah, needless to say, if you actually do enough research on both sides of that argument, the biblical argument makes the most sense. Check out Answers in Genesis, by the way. Great place for information. But yes, that's one of the reasons I am a proud Christian today, because I believe science backs up the Bible. But anyway, continuing on. And out of Eden went a river to water the garden, and from hence was it divided, and it became into 4 heads. The name of one is... Okay, here's where I start butchering stuff. Here we go. Fission, the same compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where is gold. And that gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone. Oh my goodness. I'm probably butchering some of these, but it's fine. It's fine. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same compasseth the whole land of Cush. And the name of the third river is Hikadel. This goes toward the east side of Ashur. Oh boy. And the fourth river is Para. Then the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden, that he might dress it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Thou shalt eat freely of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt die the death. That's one way to put it. Also the Lord God said, It is not good that the man should be himself alone. I will make him a helpmeet for him. So the Lord God formed of the earth every beast of the field and every fowl of the heaven, and brought them unto the man to see how he would call them. For howsoever the man named the living creature, so was the name thereof. The man thereof therefore gave names unto all cattle, and to the fowl of the heaven, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam found he not a helper met for him. Therefore the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from the man, he made a woman, and brought her to the man. Then the man said, This is now bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of the man. Therefore shall man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, and man and his wife, and they were not ashamed. Okay. And thus ends chapter 2. Yeah, I think it's silly that most people think science and Christianity have to be at odds. I agree. So next time we read chapter 3, I will say, Genesis is one of my favorite books, mainly because of the creation account, and second, because of the global flood. Because the global flood makes a lot of sense, is one of the best explanations for the fossil record, because it makes a lot more sense for fossils, for animals to be buried in tons of rock layers laid down by water all over the earth if it happened in a global flood, rather than slowly getting buried under river sediments, which, if that was happening, we'd see it today. Makes more sense with the biblical account, just saying. Anyway, so that is our Bible reading for today from the awesome 59.9 Geneva Bible. I love this thing. But yeah. And yet again, Answers in Genesis. Highly recommend it. But anyway, now that we are done with that, it is time for our next book and our next chapter to read for today's episode. And today's episode chapter is, of course, the novelization of the Heavensward expansion. Also, great artwork yet again. This book has such good artwork, especially this right here, the artwork of Eorzea and Nidhogg. Oh, it's so good. Oh, and there's a Stinian back there. I didn't even see that. That's pretty awesome. No, Andang, no. Oh my gosh. Oh no. Oh gosh. Anyway. All right, before I start reading this, how many chapters am I going to be reading here? Or how many pages of this chapter? Oh goodness. Okay. The real question is, do I read the post stuff? Okay. There is a lot to the post stuff. I'll see how the stream's going and how my voice box is feeling by the time I get to the first post patch story. But we will at least try to read all the pages of the main Heavensward expansion here, see if there's some new lore we can find. But first, I'm going to drink something so I don't lose my voice like I did on my second Ranger reading episode. Okay, now that I am all hydrated, we shall continue. Okay. Heavensward. Still, like, one of my favorite expansions ever in a video game that has expansions or DLC, but continuing on. And it's definitely not because it's elves versus dragons or anything. So it was that the Warrior of Light, together with some few companions, would come unto Ishgard at the behest of their faithful friend Lord Hosherfont. Though they had been brought low through treachery, their names blackened with royal blood, they yet held hope in their hearts and dreams of redemption. Coming to Ishgard. Upon emerging from the Sildon ruins through which he made his escape from Ul'dah, the Warrior of Light was met by none other than Alphino Levier, the Scion, who had been betrayed and imprisoned by his own crystal braves, had been freed by Pippin Tarpin. Pippin! Fool of a Lalafell. Anyway, Vice Marshal of the Immortal Flames, an adopted son of General Raban. With the aid of Pippin and the humble peddler, the Warrior of Light and Alphino sought out Cid Garland, who delivered them out of Thanalan and into Coerthas with all haste. Beyond the reach of the Crystal Braves and the Brass Blades at last, the pair sought refuge in Camp Dragonhead, where they were reunited with Tataru, and enjoyed a brief respite to consider their next course of action. After some discussion, the Scions resolved to seek sanctuary in Ishgard with the backing of Lord Hosherfont and his faithful connections. I read that wrong. And his familial connections. They enjoyed the hospitality of Camp Dragonhead until finally being granted admission to the city proper as wards of House Fortam. And so, together with Alphino and Tataru, the Warrior of Light passed through the gates long closed to outsiders and arrived in Foundation. There they were greeted by a humble manservant, who then guided them to Fortam Manor, where they would attempt to begin anew. By the way, I heard a comedian point out how finished buildings should be called builds. Look at that whole cool built over there. Oh, man. You know, if there's a good place to test that theory out, it would be in Minecraft. Someone should try making a whole Minecraft server where everyone has to call buildings built. That would be funny. I'd watch that stream. Okay. Count Edmond de Fortam, patriarch of House Fortam, had taken a tremendous risk in granting the Scions his protection, and so Alphinaud soon realized that only by publicly serving Ishgard could the Scions hope to silence his opponent's objections. However, Alphinaud also believed that this arrangement could benefit the Scions in unexpected ways, such as inviting contact with people outside Ishgard who might feasibly know something of their missing comrade's whereabouts. Well, he and Tataru focused their efforts on that task. The Warrior of Light aided the Count's two true-born sons, Lords Erturel and Emiliane, with their activities in Falcon's Nest and at Camp Cloudtop, respectively. In eastern Coerthas, the adventurer uncovered a hidden heretic sanctuary, and in the process was briefly reunited with Lady Iceheart. To his surprise, the once defiant heretic leader expressed regret for the atrocities committed by the Dravanians in the second assault upon Ishgard, which had taken place during the banquet of Ul'dah. In the Sea of Clouds, he encountered the Vanu Vanu, a race of bird-like beings, and discovered that, like so many other beast tribes, they had called upon a primal for salvation. In this instance, Bismarck, Lord of the Mist, giant whale. Yeah, that's giant whale. The white whale, one could say. However, the Warrior of Light's actions did not serve to endear the Scions to all the inhabitants of Ishgard, in what Lord Edmund surmised was nothing more than a political ploy to defame House Fortam. Alphinaud and Tataru were arrested by Sir Gunanox, a knight of the Heavens Ward, on the charge of fomenting heresy. Heresy! These 12 chosen sirs answered to none save the Archbishop himself, and their testimony was unimpeachable. As such, under Ishgardian law, only the Fury could disprove Sir Grynox's claims by granting victory in a trial by combat between the accuser and the accused. Owing to his magical talents, Alphinaud was capable of fighting, but as Tataru was not, the Warrior of Light was allowed to fight in her place as champion. And so, under the watchful gaze of the Fury and the assembled gentry of Ishgard, the two Scions fought and defeated Sir Grynox and Sir Papalain, hereby earning Alphinaud and Tataru their freedom. Does get awkward with remodeling though. Oh, I'm sure, ending. I'm sure. I like this artwork of House Fortam's Manor. It's a little small on the stream, but looks great in the book. Unlike many of his highborn peers, Count Edmond de Fortam was willing, if not eager, to work closely with the Warrior of Light and other foreigners. The personal memory... Old English. The personal memoirs he wrote chronicling the events surrounding the end of the Dragonstar War would be treasured by later generations for their historical value, which is so cool that they use his history books in like the narration for the Heavensward expansion. Really cool. Oh, hello, Fahrenheit. Build. Oh, no. Oh, what is ending started? Oh, boy. Keeping the flame alive. Shortly after the trial by combat was concluded, the Warrior of Light received an invitation to a personal audience with His Eminence Archbishop Thoradin VII. The Archbishop warmly welcomed the adventurer, apologizing for the misunderstanding which led to Alphinaud and Tataru's incarceration. Having taken the highly unusual step of dismissing his personal guard, he then revealed that he had communicated with the Ascians, going on, explaining that he was paying lip service to their wishes while plotting to move against them. He bade the Warrior of Light assist him in this endeavor, stating that only by wresting Eorzea from the shadowless villain's grasp could a lasting peace ever be forged. Yet this would not be the only troubling revelation that day, for upon returning to Fortam Manor, Tataru reported that Rabban Eldon was to be executed for crimes against the Sultanate. Dun 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 dun. Determined not to lose yet another ally, the Scions resolved to do everything in their power to rescue the deposed Flame General. They traveled to Libzalminsa and met with Admiral Merob, who had remained a stout ally and had been working closely with Doman Shinobi to ascertain Rabban's whereabouts. She directed them to her contact at Revenant's Toll, who had learned that Rabban had been taken to Halatelli in Thanalan. Together with the Dolmens, the Scions then rescued Rabban from the clutches of the traitorous Crystal Braves. Also, shout out to my favorite character, Yagiri, on that one. Also, it's a bit awkward when applied to people. She's got a nice build. I wish I hadn't read that out loud, but okay. Gosh dang it. Man. Outside Halatelli, Raban and the Scions were approached by a messenger who claimed that his mistress was sympathetic to their cause and bade them return to the Waking Sands in Vesper Bay. Pray return to the Waking Sands. Intrigued, they accepted this invitation. Upon arriving at the Science former headquarters, they were greeted by a number of familiar faces: Urianger, Pippin, and Papashan. Soon after, it was revealed that the messenger's mistress was Dulala, head of the Order of Naldal and member of the Syndicate. To Raban's immense relief, she confirmed a suspicion Alphino had long harbored, that Nanamu Unamro had not been murdered and was in fact still alive and was likely confined somewhere in a state of induced slumber. Raban resolved to free her from her captivity and thereafter see that Lord Lalarito and all others involved were made to answer for their part in the betrayal. Dun dun dun. In search of Lady Iceheart. That art is so nice. Oh my goodness. I love I love that art at the top of the page. I would use that as a freaking wallpaper. Man. I just had a thought that I kind of hate. Oh no, why is this in my head? Oh no. Okay. Next time I'm in voice chat with anyone that in my community that plays both Final Fantasy XIV and Wuthering Waves, I'm going to make a comparison that I just realized actually kind of works, and I kind of hate it. I'm not gonna say it now though, unless someone wants me to. But man, anyway, moving on. In search of Lady Iceheart. Regrettably, the Scions had precious little time to enjoy the reunion with General Raban. Nidhogg's forces, twice before beaten back, were preparing to resume their siege on the Holy See. Upon returning to the city, the Warrior of Light and his comrades were faced with a choice: to remain in a besieged Ishgard or seek sanctuary elsewhere. But though Lord Edmund would have them seek shelter from the storm, the time for running had passed. Together they would stand and fight. Yet even should the knights succeed in turning back the horde, the casualties would be catastrophic. Recognizing this, Alphino proposed that he and the Warrior of Light seek out Lady Iceheart, who had expressed contrition for her crimes, and persuade her to act as their intermediary in an attempt to convince Nidhogg to abandon his bloody course. They would be aided in this diplomatic mission by an unexpected ally, the Azure Dragoon Estinian, who wished to be present in the event. Negotiations failed, and there was no recourse but to slay the beast outright. Thus did the three journey to Western Coerthas, seeking to learn what they could of the heretics and their elusive leader, before eventually managing to summon her to a peaceful parley, where she relayed the history of treachery that fueled Nidhogg's wrath and the Dragon Song War. 1,200 years ago, an Elzen tribe first sought to claim the lands of Coerthas as their home, lands which were already home to dragonkind. Thus did a bloody war begin, a war that may have never ended were it not for a woman named Shiva. While those around her fought and died, she attempted to parley with the dragons, and in so doing discovered them to be possessed of profound intelligence and reason. The great worm, Hraesvelgr in particular, so enchanted Shiva that she found herself growing to love the creature, whom her people considered a monster. In the eyes of the near-immortal dragon, however, the fleeting life of an Elzen is that of a freshly cut rose. Scarce had the flower bloomed before it began to fade and wither. Such melancholy musings plagued Hraesvelgr, who had found in Shiva an unexpected and beloved soulmate. Unable to bear the thought of their separation, the maid bid the worm consume her, that their spirit... The maid bid the worm consume her, that their spirits might be entwined for eternity. Though loath to perform the deed, Hraesvelgr ultimately gave in to her plea, and soon thereafter the tale of their ill-fated love spread throughout the two warring factions. No more could they raise blade or claw against one another, knowing that the souls of their kin were so inexplicably bound. In the days that followed, man and dragon learned to live in harmony, and together built a nation unlike any the world had ever known. For 200 years did this blissful age of peace continue, as it would to this day, had vilest envy not stirred in the hearts of the Ellison. It was said that the worms owe their longevity to the boundless reserves of vitality found within their eyes, and 'twas in this belief that a traitorous band of knights deceived their allies of some 2 centuries, and took by force that which they coveted. Nidhogg, he who then stood poised to unleash his wormlings upon Ishgard, was the great dragon who lost an eye to Ellison treachery, and until he prized it from the hands of the traitor's progeny, no amount of conciliatory words would stay his fury. So spoke the Lady Iceheart, who had learned the truth when walking in the memories of Hraesvelgr himself years ago, for like the Warrior of Light, she too possessed the echo. Nevertheless, Estinian was quick to question the veracity of her account, and reiterated his belief that Nidhogg was lost to reason, prompting Alphino to propose that they instead seek out Hraesvelgr, who had once before endeavored to end the violence between dragon and man. Iceheart agreed to guide them to him, and so the 4 set forth for his home in Dravania. Ooh, it's Mr. Rejoice in the Glory of Combat man over here. Also, that's some nice artwork. Look at him. Look at Bug Primal Man. The Lord of the Hive. At the behest of Lady Iceheart, or Yazael, as she requested they address her henceforth, Yazael. The party stopped at the village of Tailfeather within the Chocobo Forest to rest and make inquiries before pushing on towards Salmal. The village's leader, Marchant, told them of the beast tribe known as the Nath, and of their recent acts of unprovoked hostility. According to the hunter, no one in the region, not even the mighty Dravanians, had been spared the insect-like people's aggression. Vidofnir, the leader of the dragons who called the ancient ruins of Enixtrine home, later confirmed this account, declaring that she could not leave her post unguarded for fear of the Nass god. Suddenly, the beastmen's aggression began to make sense. They had been acting under the influence of a primal. Alphino understood that so long as the primal was permitted to remain, the way to Salmal would remain closed. And so the signs proposed that they deal with the threat to the Dravanians' territory in exchange for safe passage. The bargain was struck, and the party retraced their steps, returning to Tailfeather before then seeking the counsel of the Vath, a group of outcasts who lived apart from the main colony of Loth Asnath. The non-mind, they called themselves, had been severed from the one mind, and thus were not party to their thoughts, nor were they loyal to their warlike god, Ravana. Ultimately, they could provide the party with little in the way of useful information as to how the primal might be engaged, save for an offhand suggestion that they offer themselves as sacrifices. Yazael and the Warrior of Light decided to heed the vast advice, and surrendered themselves to the Nath after dispatching no small number of their drones. The plan worked, and soon the pair found themselves dragged before Lord Ravana, master of sacred blades and wrath of the colony. Seizing the opportunity, Yazael boldly challenged him to a contest of might. Should the pair prevail, the Nath should cease hostilities with the Dravanians, and should Ravana emerge the victor, they would join his army as eternal thralls. Having goaded the primal into accepting her terms, Yazael drew upon the energy of the Nath's hoarded crystals to transform herself into Saint Shiva. Even with Shiva's great strength, however, the heretic leader was no match for Ravana's flashing blades, leaving the Warrior of Light to take to the field alone. Yes, fourfold master of the blade indeed, fair knight. And for some reason, his one line of "Rejoice in the glory of combat" still is like the only thing I remember from him. After a long and furious battle, Lord Ravana was at last laid down his weapons, defeated. He duly proclaimed the Warrior of Light the victor by sacred right of combat, and vowed to call his followers back from the dragon's domain. Mountaintop diplomacy. True to her word, Vidofnir opened the way to Salmal, and at the end of the perilous mountain path, the Warrior of Light and his companions came to a domain where dragon and men had once lived in harmony, whose majesty no mortal eye had glimpsed for nigh on 1,000 years. Yet in a strange twist of fate, they would first encounter none other than a Moogle, who fled upon spotting the unexpected travelers. Oh no, it's the Koopos. Run, not the Koopo. Thanks to the diplomacy of Connie Senna and the sight of her companion Kuplokab's familiar form, the Moogles of the Churning Mists were at last persuaded to reveal themselves. I always forget Connie Senna actually helps you in that. I'm remembering why I enjoyed Heavensward so much. Despite Kuplokab's reassurances, however, the Moogles' chieftain Moglin was not convinced that the Warrior of Light would act in his people's best interests. Yes, him and his fluffy pillow throne. It was decreed that the party would undergo a number of trials that Moglin might judge them worthy of his assistance. In truth, however, they were nothing more than a convenient distraction, a means to keep the Warrior of Light and his companions occupied, while the Moogles secretly repaired the horn required to summon Hraesvelgr. Oh boy. Better pay your Koopo nut taxes, Koopo. Gosh dang it. Freaking Moogles, man. At least it's not good King Moogle Mug. With the horn in their possession, the party departed for Zenith, and there atop the ruins of the ancient palace beckoned the Great Worm to parley. To their great relief, he answered the horn's call at once, but their hopes were soon dashed by the harsh words and the grim truth he rendered unto them that day. Also, cool art of Hraesvelgr right here. That is really cool art. I like that. Heart of Ice. Hraesvelgr was displeased to find that his sanctuary had been invaded by the children of man, and he only grew further incensed when Yziel proclaimed herself to be Shiva reborn. The worm angrily decreed that the spirit she had summoned belonged not to Shiva, but was a shade conjured by her own fancy, a deity of her own making, crafted with the knowledge that she had gleaned from her visions years ago. Shaken but undeterred, Alphinaud implored Hraesvelgr to join his voice to theirs in a call for peace and forgiveness. But in response, the worm recounted the tale of his brood sister Ratatusker's murder and the treachery of King Thordan. In the 2 centuries of harmony that followed St. Shiva's sacrifice, the Elzen learned that the eyes of a great worm were the wellspring of his strength. Out of the selfish desire to possess that strength, King Thordan and his I think it's supposed to be loyal knights. It says leal. That must be Old English for loyal. Lured Ratatusker into an ambush and took from her that which they craved. They feasted upon her eyes in the manner of wild beasts, in so doing gained strength beyond that of mortal men. Nidhogg was the first to learn of the atrocity, and he took to the skies hungry for vengeance. But though he slew Thordan and some few of his knights, their fellow butchers knew only too well where to aim their spears, and with now practiced savagery, they claimed his eyes and sent him flailing from the field. When pressed for evidence of his claims, Hraesvelgr observed that all the traitor's progeny bore a trace of Ratatusker's essence, but a single sip of dragon's blood was enough to awaken it. Those who abandoned their loyalties would be rewarded with a drink, and thus be transformed to join the ranks of Nidhogg's ever-growing army as newborn dragons. One by one, through death or defection, his brood brother would account for all of the betrayer's children. Though Hraesvelgr had revealed much that was hidden about Ishgard's bloody history, it did not to change the fact that the Warrior of Light and his companion's mission had ended in failure. With their hopes for peace shattered, it was time to consider more desperate measures. New winds, old friends. Oh boy. If Ishgard was to be spared, then Nidhogg must be slain. Such was the opinion of Estinian, following the failed negotiations at Zenith. Though she could not condone their actions, Yziel had not the strength or will to oppose them, and so the party left her and her shattered faith behind, continuing eastwards toward the Eyrie, the home of the Dread Worm. Ah, the Eyrie. I remember that dungeon. I've only run it way too many times. However, having sensed the death of his consort, the weary Nidhogg had surrounded his lair with a barrier of impenetrable winds. Gazing upon the scene, Alphinaud was reminded of how a similar barrier once barred their entrance to the primal Garuda's domain, oh boy, until they had discovered means to penetrate it with the aid of the engineer Sid von Garland. Leaving Estinian to stand watch over the area for a time, the Warrior of Light and Alphino returned to Ishgard, where they found Sid, and perhaps more importantly, his two employees, Biggs and Wedge, who had been hard at work at the Skysteel manufactory developing a diminutive airship known as a Manicutter, which seemed an ideal means for surmounting the area's defenses. As they set about explaining the craft's various advantages and disadvantages, however, the door burst open to admit a panting Tataru who had news of the Sultana. Noting the urgency of the situation, Sid bid the Warrior of Light and Alphino concentrate on matters in Ul'dah, while he and his engineers continued work on the Manicutter. Awakening in Ul'dah. The Warrior of Light and Alphino returned to the Waking Sands, and there met with Raban, who, despite his injury, had regained considerable strength. He and his allies had concluded that the Sultana was most likely being kept in a poison-induced sleep somewhere within the palace. However, before any attempt would be made to rescue her, they deemed it prudent to track down her poisoner, Marielle, the Sultana's former lady-in-waiting. Taking care not to alert the monitorists or their agents, the group converged upon the Silver Bazaar, where they confronted the former lady-in-waiting. But before Raban could wring the truth from the trembling Marielle, Prioris Dualala appeared, accompanied by Lord Lalarito, who proceeded to reveal the details of the assassination plot. All of his actions, he claimed, were intended to expose and eliminate Teleji Adeleji and to ensure the stability of Ul'dah. Captain Ilbert had been complicit in the scheme from the beginning, his services having been secured with a promise to support Alamegan independence once Lalarito's authority had been solidified. However, Ilbert had grown to despise his fellow countryman Raban, calling him a traitor to their people and a disgrace to their homeland. His hatred had driven him to order the disposed Flame General's execution against Lalarito's wishes, forcing the merchant to sever all ties with his agent and withdraw the support of the Crystal Braves. I will say that is better explained in the book than it is in the actual game, because I remember the 2 or 3 times I played that quest, I still was confused as to exactly what was going on with Lalarito and Ilbert's plans there, but that makes more sense. As proof of his good intentions and a gesture of conciliation, Lalarito presented Raban with the means to rouse the Sultana from her death-like stare. Although he cared not for the merchant's motives, Raban recognized that Lalarito had saved the Sultana's life, and for that he was willing to forgo his vengeance. So it was that Nanamo Unama was at last awoken from her slumber, and Raban Alden was reinstated as General of the Immortal Flames. Yay! Also, more awesome artwork right here of Estinian, and I think that's supposed to be Nidhogg? That is really cool art. Dang. Into the Eyrie. With matters in Ul'dah resolved, the Warrior of Light returned to the Skysteel manufactory in Ishgard. There he met with Sid Garland once more, who was pleased to announce that the Manicutters were undergoing final adjustments and would soon be ready to fly. Together with Estinian, who had recently returned to the capital, the Warrior of Light then met with Sir Emmerich and apprised him of recent developments, as well as their plan to assault the Eyrie and slay Nidhogg once and for all. The Lord Commander did not hesitate to pledge his blade to this cause, but Estinian was steadfast in his refusal, for should they fail, it would be Sir Emmerich's duty to command the city's defenses against the Horde. Alphino too wished to participate in the great endeavor, but he was denied by Estinian as well, who acknowledged his promise, but believed that his skills would not suffice. So it was that the Warrior of Light and the Azure Dragoon set forth to engage the Dreadworm Nidhogg in a battle that would forever change the course of history. As one of the first brood, Nidhogg was more than a match for any mortal being. Yet Estinian was possessed of a secret weapon, the Eye of Nidhogg, safeguarded by the Holy See for centuries. An ancient relic and a wellspring of power passed down from Azure Dragoon to Azure Dragoon throughout the ages. With the Eye, Estinian can not only draw upon the worm's strength, but suppress it as well. Aided by the Azure Dragoon, the Warrior of Light finally succeeded in bringing the mighty creature down. Astidian then took to the air and delivered the coup de grace, gorging out Nidhogg's remaining eye with his legendary spear, Gay Bulg, and sending the lifeless worm tumbling into the clouds below. Alright. The Dragon Song's beginnings. Nidhogg, that incarnation of rage, who had tormented the people of Ishgard for nigh on 1,000 years, was dead, his remaining eye a trophy for the Azure Dragoon. As he looked on his triumphant ally, the Warrior of Light was treated to another vision of the past through the power of the Echo. He bore witness to the aftermath of another battle with Nidhogg long ago, in which Haldreth, the son of the fallen King Thordan the First, and his surviving knights claimed the Dreadworm's two eyes, but unlike his father, Haldreth lamented the dark deeds which were done that day. And so he forswore the throne and embarked upon a journey to repent for his sins. Others followed his example, renouncing Thordan's legacy, and when all was said and done, 4 knights remained. 4 knights who would found the 4 great houses of Ishgard, Fortam, Helianart, Durandir, and Dimazel. Together they would shape their nation with a history of their own making, and consign the bitter truth of their betrayal to oblivion. The Warrior of Light shared this revelation with his companion, who though greatly troubled, had no choice but to accept it as immutable truth. Yet from these answers arose another question, for if Haldreth had taken with him one of Nidhogg's 2 eyes and entrusted the second to the founders of Ishgard, then whence came the 3rd eye which Astidian had claimed but moments ago? In search of answers, the pair returned to Zenith, where Yazael yet lingered, unable to come to terms with the magnitude of her self-deception. They summoned Hraesvelgr once more, who reclaimed the 3rd eye of his own. Once more, by the power of the Echo, the Warrior of Light was made to know the truth, the beginning of 1,000-year torment. Bereft of his eyes and howling with rage for the murdered Rettusker, Nidhogg decried Hraesvelgr for placing his faith in man for the love of Shiva. He beseeched his brood brother for the strength to punish the murderers and every child of their line. And with it began the terrible vengeance which consumed him until his dying breath. Hraesvelgr confirmed that the Warrior of Light had seen, that he had helped condemn the people of Ishgard to an eternity of suffering. Through the truth of the Dragon's Song, war's beginnings had at last been laid bare. The adventurer and his companions found no solace in the knowledge. I'm also wondering what this art is of. Is that supposed to be Nidhogg? I'm unsure. Interesting. Unrest in Ishgard. Alas, Nidhogg's death did not mark the end of Ishgard's troubles. As the party reflected upon the many truths they had learned, Sir Emmerich contacted Astidian via Link Pearl to inform them that heretics had infiltrated the capital and begun an uprising within its walls. Joined by Yazael, who had no knowledge of her people's plans, the party returned to Ishgard and sought to bring a peaceful end to the senseless destruction. Chaos reigned in the streets as fires raged and the heretics cried for blood, but heedless of the danger, the Warrior of Light and his companions pushed on until they met with the vanguard of the advancing mob. Yazael stood before them and delivered an impassionate speech, declaring Nidhogg and his quest for vengeance to be dead and imploring her people to go in peace. Though they heeded her words and thereafter quit the city, tensions remained high in the wake of their assault. At Fortam Manor, the Warrior of Light and his companions revealed to their Ishgardian allies the sordid origins of the Dragon Song War. Unsurprisingly, they were troubled by the revelation that the Ishgardian faith was built upon a lie. Moreover, as the structure of Ishgardian society presupposed a stark difference between the origins of the lowborn and the highborn, the fact that all Ishgardians could trace their ancestry to the surviving Knights 12 threatened to undermine the foundations of their class structure. Overcome with emotion, Sir Emmerich declared that these lies could not be suffered to continue, for Yazael would share the truth with her followers, and the Holy See would be powerless to stop its spread. No longer ruled by a common fear of the dragons, the lowborn and highborn would be free to turn on one another. The disfranchised would rise up united, and blood would flow in the streets once more. Sir Emmerich fervently believed that Ishgard could only be saved by revealing the truth and striving for fundamental change. To that end, he left to confront the Archbishop alone, despite the others' warnings that he was certain to be branded a heretic for his trouble. Though all present were doubtful as to the wisdom of Sir Emmerich's plan, Lucia was determined to support her commander. However, she also professed that should he fail to return from the Holy Vault, she would not hesitate to marshal forces to set him free. The Warrior of Light, Alphino, Stinian, and Lord Hoshafat all agreed that should the worst come to the worst, they too would join in his rescue. Oh boy. A Knight's Calling. I already know what this is about. Slash cry, man. Ugh. Having seen the determination writ upon the faces of those around him, Lord Enmont pledged the support of House Fertam to Lucia's plans. Alas, even with an army of knights at their disposal, a direct assault on the vault would be fruitless. However, there is one other faction whose aid would prove invaluable to their cause. A group of low-born revolutionaries headquartered in the Broom that would doubtless be eager to see the established order overturned. Alphino and the Warrior of Light made their way to the lowest level of foundation and asked after the revolutionaries and their elusive leader, the Mongrel. Though the locals were not wont to speak freely of their group, the party's efforts eventually bore fruit, and they were granted an opportunity to plead their case at a private meeting in the Forgotten Night. As Alphino attempted to win the revolutionaries' cooperation, seemingly in vain, Sir Sheribert, a knight in the Heavensward, strode into the tavern, accusing all present of plotting insurrection. With no recourse left to them, the Warrior of Light and the others stepped outside to confront the knight and his men, and soon St. Valroyan's Forum was transformed into a bloody battlefield. Joined by Lord Hoshafat and Lucilla, the Warrior of Light and his comrades emerged to overwhelm Sir Charlevert, who withdrew. However, the joy of victory soon faded when they learned that Sir Emmerich had been imprisoned, and the Heavensward placed in command of the Temple Knights. Clearly, they could wait no longer to act. Lucilla's plan to rescue Sir Emmerich hinged upon luring the bulk of Ishgard's defenses out of the city. Correctly deducting that the revolutionaries had recruited knights in service to the High House, she bade Hilda help by ordering these sympathizers to spread word of a heretic army massing outside the gates of judgment, and the revolutionaries' leader agreed. At last, the assault on the vault could proceed. Also, I still wish Hilda was actually in story more than she is. She is, like, hardly mentioned for the rest of the game, and it kind of makes me sad. While Lucilla and Lord Hoshafat led a party into the goal beneath the vault to free Sir Emmerich, the Warrior of Light and his men aimed for the highest levels and attempted to capture Archbishop Thornton VII. After facing wave after wave of Temple Knights and the Heavensward besides, the adventurer and his allies stood at the pinnacle of the vault, unbowed. Unable to repel their advance, Sir Seraphim ordered a full retreat, and the Warrior of Light gave chase. Rejoined by Lucilla's party and a wounded Sir Emmerich, they pursued Thornton VII, finally catching up with him as he prepared to board an airship and escape. The Warrior of Light rushed headlong towards the vessel, but in his haste to apprehend his quarry, he failed to notice a transformed Sir Seraphim taking aim, a spear of pure light in his hand. Alert to the danger, Lord Hoshafat belled a warning and raised a shield in the Warrior of Light's defense, but the steel gave way and the spear found its mark. Rest in peace, Lord Hoshafat. Man. The warrior... Oh, yeah. The airship forgotten, the allies surrounded Lord Hoshafat, who lay upon the ground struggling to breathe. As Sir Emmerich cradled him in his arms, the fallen knight looked at the Warrior of Light with a mixture of agony and relief, and bade him favor him with a smile before the light left his eyes forever. Man. That was such an emotional part of the game's story, too. Man. The key to Azizla. The Warrior of Light and the others reflected upon the unnatural powers demonstrated by the Knights of the Heavensward and ultimately concluded that the Knights must have used their own bodies as vessels for the souls of the legendary King Thornton and his Knights 12, much as Yazael had for Saint Shiva. Though Sir Emmerich knew not his father's plans, or the significance of Azizla, a mysterious land which the Archbishop was heard to speak before fleeing. He declared that the Archbishop and the Heavensward must be stopped, and implored the signs of the Seventh Dawn to help bring his father to justice. Alphino answered his request by stating that if the Heavensward had indeed harnessed primal powers, it was the duty of the remaining Scions to oppose them. to begin the hunt for the Soliel, the Archbishop's personal airship. Or so began the hunt for the airship. Once more, the Warrior of Light and Alphino returned to Sid Garland, who with the Enterprise delivered them to the northern reaches of the Sea of Clouds, where the Soliel had been seen. There, the party made contact with the Vanu Vanu of the Zundu tribe, who revealed to them that the Archbishop had come in search of the key to Azisla, a land of forbidden secrets. However, the request was complicated by the fact that the Bismarck, the insatiable white whale, that was the primal of the Vanu Vanu, had devoured the island upon which the key was kept. Oh, man. That they might deny the Archbishop his prize, Sid conceived a plan to lure out the ravenous primal by using the Enterprise to tow a small island through the Sea of Clouds. From this selfsame island, the Warrior of Light then launched his offensive against Bismarck, and like so many before, the Lord of Mist soon fell to his might. Also, nice picture of the white whale right there. Really makes him look big. Man. It was then that the Archbishop and the Ishgard... Oh, I read that wrong. It was then that the Archbishop and the Ascian Igorium chose to reveal themselves. With her dark magics, the Ascian effortlessly plucked the key from the Warrior of Light's grasp, despite the fact that he had managed to regain the Blessing of Light, albeit at a fraction of its former strength. The Archbishop raised the key aloft, and from it shone forth a beam of light which split the heavens, revealing the way to the legendary floating isle. The Warrior of Light could only watch powerless as the Archbishop and Igorum then departed for Azisla. Oh man, here we go. An engineering enterprise. Nice. I get what you're doing there. Speaking of which. Though their efforts had ultimately served to aid the Archbishop, the Scions were not about to admit defeat. Before resuming their pursuit of the Heavensward, however, the Warrior of Light and Alphino paid a visit to Okezundu to inform the Vanu Vanu that Bismarck was no longer a threat. To their shock, upon arriving in the village, they were greeted not only by chieftains, but by a contingent of Imperial soldiers under the command of Regula van Hydras, and escorted by Varus Zos Galvus, the newly crowned Emperor of Garlemald, who, like the Archbishop, coveted the secrets of Azisla. After taking measure of the two Scions, Varus ordered the execution of the Beastmen. Yet before they could carry out his command, Lucilla, piloting a suit of Magitech armor, forced the Imperials to withdraw with a barrage of cannon fire, and escorted the two Scions back to the Enterprise. The airship followed the path marked by the beam, and before long the Warrior of Light and his companions found themselves nearing Azisla. However, they soon discovered that it was surrounded by an impenetrable barrier which threatened to tear the Enterprise apart, and so they set course for Ishgard, that they might make repairs and discuss how to breach the floating isle's defenses. Sid believed that it might be possible to pierce the barrier surrounding Azisla by mounting a ram of condensed ether on the Enterprise. There was just one problem. He had not the faintest idea how to make one. Designing such a device would require the expertise of a true authority in the field, an authority such as Munbrida or Y'shtola. Alas, Munbrida had perished and Y'shtola was nowhere to be found, that is, until Tataru acquired a clue. Oh boy. During their search of the Silda aqueducts, the Immortal Flames had discovered Y'shtola's wand. After close study, Urianger determined that the Archon had invoked Flow, a forbidden teleportation magic, in order to make her escape. Traces of her passing led to the Twelveswood and suggested she remain there, her essence adrift in the life stream. And so the Scions turned to the Seed Seers for assistance, who in turn petitioned the Elemental's aid in plucking Y'shtola from the ether. Which is still kind of insane, because it means they technically pulled her soul from the freaking ethereal realm, which is crazy. But the lengths we go to keep this cat girl alive, I swear. Anyway, the first flight of the Excelsior. After being briefed on the situation regarding Azisla, Y'shtola flatly stated that she lacked the knowledge to build an etheric ram. However, she knew someone who could, her former master, Matoya, who had been living as a hermit on the fringes of Sharlayan in the Dravinian hinterlands. After an unexpectedly eventful journey to the previously thought abandoned colony, the Scions met with Master Matoya, who was willing to lend her aid to their cause. The esteemed scholar revealed to them that long ago she had developed a device known as an etheric converter, which could be used to draw in and concentrate ether to produce a destructive force that could conceivably breach the barrier surrounding Azazla. The fruits of her research were apparently compiled within a tome, which then lay sealed within the Great Google Library. Another fun dungeon that I recently ran on stream. And the Scions had to overcome the dangers within in order to retrieve it. Armed with the knowledge to build the etheric ram, Sid Garland set to work with obvious relish. When finished, he rechristened his airship the Enterprise Excelsior, or simply the Excelsior, as should one prefer. Alphino, Y'shtola, Estinian, and the Warrior of Light took their places aboard the vessel. Together with Sid and his two assistants, departed for Azazla once more. As they approached the floating isle, Estinian brought forth the eye and channeled its boundless energies to fuel the newly installed etheric ram, which made short work of the elegant barrier. However, the party would have no time to celebrate, as moments later the Enterprise Excelsior found itself within the shadow of a gargantuan vessel, successor to the Agrius, the Imperial flagship lost at Silver Teal Fells 15 years ago. The Gratian was the newest addition to the Imperial fleet and the pride of the 6th Legion. The Imperial battleship had lain hidden within the cloud bank, waiting for the Scions to defeat the Elegant defenses, and now the path was clear. Which is still funny, because you think that's the biggest Garlean ship at, like, set after the, defeated the Agrius. You think that one's the biggest, and then you go to Bajda and Shadowbringers, they're like, oh, they have an even bigger battleship in the sky. What the heck? Oh, man. The Gratian opened fire on the Enterprise Excelsior, and the smaller vessel struggled in vain to evade the explosions was boomed through the sky. Hopelessly outmatched, they braced themselves for the inevitable, when from the west appeared Hraesvelgr, and upon the worm's back, Yazael. Racked with guilt for the countless lives lost to her crusade, and seeking to atone for the sins committed in Saint Shiva's name, the young maiden had yearned to come to Azazla that she might fight alongside the Warrior of Light once more. She beseeched Hraesvelgr that he might bear her to the adventurous side, and even in his melancholy the worm could not deny her. Yazael leaped from Hraesvelgr's back and plunged headlong toward the Gratian, clutching tightly to her breast a crystal of light once bequeathed to her by Hydaelyn long ago. Transforming into Shiva, she turned to face the enemy battleship and engaged it single-handed so that the Warrior of Light, in whom she placed her hopes and dreams for the future, could live. She froze the battleship's hull and cast them back, ripping holes in its reinforced hull. She encased herself in a great glacier of ice and rammed the vessel with all her might, bringing it to a grinding halt. Yet the Gratian, the largest airship ever built, withstood her desperate assault. Well, at this time in the story, until you get to later in the game where they build a bigger one. As the Enterprise Excelsior sped away safely toward Azazla, the Warrior of Light and his companions could only watch helplessly as the Gratian took aim at an exhausted Shiva and fired again and again. Returning to her original form, Yazael fell with a smile on her lips for those she had saved. Man, this is gonna make me all emotional again. Dang, dude. That art of King Thornton is freaking awesome, though. What the heck? Man. Also Estinian with the eyeballs, I see. Fetters of Lament! By Yazael's sacrifice had the Scions and their companions at last set foot on Azazla. Determined that her death should not be for naught, they set forth to explore the area, and with the aid of ancient elegant technology, they determined that the Archbishop was likely inside the etherochemical research facility at the heart of the floating isle. To reach him, however, they would first need to contend with the Imperial troops from the Gratian, which had made landfall on the isle. While Alphino, Y'shtola, and Estinian kept the forces of the 6th Legion occupied, the Warrior of Light proceeded towards the etherochemical research facility alone. Along the way, he encountered Tiamat of the First Brood, who had consigned herself to an eternal punishment within her elegant prison for consorting with the darkness 5,000 years before. She explained that during a great war between the Alligans and the dragons of Mercidia, Bahamut, her brood brother and mate, had been slain. In her grave, she heeded the counsel of the Ascians, and with their dark arts she summoned forth Bahamut from the ether, only to discover that the primal was but a cruel mockery of her beloved. As the Warrior of Light reflected on this cautionary tale, and once more resolved to oppose the Ascians, the last remnants of the wall Midgard Summer had built around his soul shattered, and the blessing of light once more abided within Hyoland's Chosen. Having borne witness to the triumph of will, the father of dragons was at last convinced the Warrior of Light was worthy of Hyoland's favor. Before the adventurer's eyes, the avatar of the great worm shifted and grew until at last it was large enough to bear him on its back to the Etherochemical Research Facility. There the Warrior of Light fought and defeated Regula von Hydrus once more and delved deeper into the heart of the floating isle and towards his quarry. King Thordan and the Knights 12. While fighting his way through the Etherochemical Research Facility, the Warrior of Light found himself face to face with two Ascians, Laha Brea, otherwise known as Laha Bread, who had gifted Gaius von Belzar the Heart of Sabik and brought Eorzea to the brink of destruction once before, and Igorium, who had stolen the key to Azazla and placed it in the hands of the Archbishop. In a bid to eliminate the adventurer, the Ascians attacked as one, but with Hydalin's blessing restored, they were no match for him. Realizing the battle was lost, Igorium attempted to flee, but before she could make good her escape, the Warrior of Light entrapped her within a piece of white osirite, a final legacy of Minbrida's work, presented to him by Urianger as a parting gift from before they first set forth for Azazla. The adventurer then destroyed the Ascian with a blade of light forged from the remaining ether within Nidhogg's eye, forever ridding the world of a terrible menace. In spite of seeing his comrade fall, Laha Brea could not help but smile. The Warrior of Light had exhausted the eye's ether, and had not the means to strike him down. Yet the Ascian, who had for an eternity tugged at the reins of history from the shadows, had underestimated man for the last time. The Archbishop and his knights arrived, bearing the body of Haldreth and the eye's long-lost twin. Having summoned the soul of the legendary King Thordan into himself, the Archbishop conjured a divine blade using the power of the second eye, and similarly executed Laha Brea. Yeah, that was quite a moment. Like all souls, the Ascian was comprised of ether, upon which primals feast. So it was that Laha Brea's soul was shattered and consumed until naught remained of his essence. Rest in peace, Laha Bread. Judgment passed. The self-proclaimed godly king Judgment passed, the self-proclaimed God King duly turned to leave, but not before issuing the Warrior of Light a challenge. Should he reject the Archbishop's vision for a peaceful and prosperous Ishgard, he would needs strike him and his knights down. How the Warrior of Light managed to overcome such impossible odds that day, none can say. History only states that in the end he prevailed, and was the first man in Ishgardian history to arrive in the city upon Dragonback. In the days that followed, Sir Emmerich temporarily assumed the duties of Archbishop and began to guide his people towards a lasting peace. However, he and the others were yet haunted by the tragedy that had befallen Estinian and Azazla. After Thorin's defeat, the Dragoon collected the eye and its twin, and instantly fell prey to Nidhogg's lingering influence, and was claimed as a vessel for his rage. Transformed into the great worm, he took wing and vanished. Alas, so long as Nidhogg's vengeful shadow remained, the Dragon-Song War would never truly end. And we finally get to the post-Heaven's Word patches. Oh boy. Do I finish this? You know what? We'll finish it. But before we finish it, I'm going to take a quick break. I'm back. I forgot I had to do the dirt test in Uma Musume. I have to do all of those. I am doing an Uma Musume campaign, though. I started one at work today. I'm finally doing another Taiki Shuttle run. See if I can actually get my first A-rank Taiki Shuttle. I'm going to try. See how it goes. Oh, you used my rice shower? Nice. I love my rice shower. Rice shower is so good. Yeah. Yeah. I gotta finish that. Also in the Unity Cup, I got a hot spa day with Taki. Nice. Taiki Shuttle's still the only one I got the hot spring ticket for. I'm so happy. I still have the title for that somewhere. Yeah. For her being the only character I got that for, I'm happy. I'm happy. Because Taiki Shuttle is still my favorite. At least for characters in the game. If they add a certain character that they probably would never add because it's based off an American horse, but still, there's one character from the anime that if they added it to the game, I would actually main it more than Taiki Shuttle, but I don't think they'll ever add that character, sadly. Can you imagine if there was a wedding dress for Taiki? I don't know if I'd go that far. There's only... For right now, I'd say there's only one game that I play that I would use a wedding dress for a character in. And that game would be Wuthering Waves. Because if they had a Cardathea wedding dress, I would use that. 110%. But... yeah. Anyway. Oh? What are you asking O about, Alpha? Anyway, we're gonna start reading again. Final 5 pages. Here we go. As goes light, so goes darkness. In the wake of the Archbishop's fall, the nation of Ishgard trembled, the faith of her people shaken to its very core. They had embarked upon a strange and unfamiliar path, and none could predict the troubles which lay ahead. An uncertain future. In the event of the Archbishop's passing, canon law dictated that the Lord Commander of the Temple Knights was to assume his responsibilities as head of state, temporarily. They further specified that he should surrender his powers as soon as a conclave of the senior clergy in the high houses had named a new Archbishop. However, rather than attempting to conceal certain details, Sir Emmerich had elected to disclose the whole truth regarding his father's disappearance, though he had done so in an effort to regain the trust of the people. The immediate result was growing unrest, as the most sacred beliefs of the populace were called into question. Under such circumstances, selecting a new archbishop was out of the question. Sir Emmerich believed that to address the people's concerns, they must needs secure a lasting peace, a definitive end to the Dragonsaw War, marked by the re-establishment of diplomatic relations between Ishgard and Dravania. To that end, he once more turned to the Scions of the Seventh Dawn for aid, and bade Alphino and the Warrior of Light escort Lucilla to Annex Trine. The first commander, acting as Sir Emmerich's envoy, treated with Vidofnir, relaying his words with heartfelt conviction. Regrettably, the dragon's response was disappointingly non-committal, as she would need to discuss it with her father, Hraesvelgr, before a decision could be made. Nevertheless, there was a sense among the present that, in her heart of hearts, Vidofnir harbored the same hope. A dark rivalry. Also, oh my goodness. It was in my head and immediately slipped out. Kryl! Duh! I knew it was a K. Anyway, Kryl. Still, I think, arguably one of my favorite Lalafels in the whole game story. Kryl is awesome. A dark rivalry. Several members of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn remained missing, and to find them, they sought the assistance of a Charlian scholar newly come from it to Eorzea. Kryl! A member of the students of Baldessian. She had been present during the attack on the Isle of Vale when magics of immense power akin to Ultima obliterated not only the Order's headquarters, but the Isle itself. Yes, which you later investigate in Stormblood because it becomes known as Eureka. However, like the Warrior of Light, she possessed not only Veko, but availed herself of the Blessing of Light's protection, and so doing managed to survive. Upon waking from her long stupor, she learned of Minfilia's disappearance, and so she resolved to come to Eorzea, that she might more effectively assist the Scions with their search for her dear friend and the others. Cryle devised a plan to locate Thancred, who had escaped the Sildana aqueducts by the way of Y'shtola's forbidden magic flow. Her method would require the use of Master Montoya's Crystal Eye, a powerful relic that was in truth an ancient crystal of light. Once the elderly scholar consented to her plan, Cryle wasted no time carrying it out, and soon she determined that Thancred had emerged from the life stream near the base of Solm All. The Scions began their search in earnest, and after some unexpectedly awkward twists and turns, they eventually came to Loth Asknath. Drawn by the sounds of battle, they ventured within the Beastmen's stronghold, but found not their missing comrade, but a party of mysterious adventurers, who before the Scions' very eyes effortlessly slew an incarnation of the primal Ravana. The self-proclaimed warriors of darkness then abruptly attacked the warrior of light and his comrades, who struggled to defend themselves, until Thancred suddenly leapt into the fray, dueling their leader to a draw and forcing them to retreat. Though they had reaped their opponent's assault and been reunited with the missing comrade, the Scions were nevertheless troubled and unsure what to make of the encounter. Yes, which is totally not a tease of Shadowbringers or anything. Against the dying of the light. Upon returning to Ishgard, the Scions were shocked to learn that Sir Emmerich had been the target of an attempted assassination. For a mercy, he had not suffered serious injuries, but the incident was only the beginning. Shortly thereafter, buildings throughout the city burst into flame as part of what appeared to be a coordinated and ongoing attack. The Scions eagerly joined with the Temple Knights in an investigation. But although it resulted in arrest, a rebel faction calling themselves the True Brotherhood of the Faith exploited the chaos to seize control of the vault and take hostage a number of refugees who had been sheltering within. These fundamentalists, who were loyal to the previous archbishop, declared Sir Emmerich guilty of patricide and high treason and demanded that he surrender himself at once to receive the Fury's judgment, namely execution. The Lord Commander was, of course, in no position to acquiesce to their demands, and so, together with the Scions, he led an armed assault on the vault. Again. After Sir Emmerich's forces successfully secured the hostages on the lower floors, they learned that the sole remaining captive, a young girl, had been borne off to the upper levels by the priest who had led the rebels. Oh, see, I don't remember the first half of this, I'm going to be honest, but I do remember the girl being thrown off the top of the building. When at last cornered atop the vault, the man could not hear reason, and in a final act of defiance, he threw the child from the ledge. Yet when all hope seemed lost, the great white dragon Vidofnir swooped down to pluck the girl from the very jaws of death, as the crowd of Ishgardians looked on in utter amazement. And now, yes, Shadowbringers art, randomly in Heaven's Word, but that's because this whole post-patch teases Heaven's Word. It's funny just seeing Shadowbringers art in the first volume, which covers Heaven's Word and ARR, but anyway. The gears of change. An adversary were the people of Ishgard, blessed with the promise of peace between man and dragon, a stirring symbol of hope that was Vidofnir's rescue of an innocent child. Nevertheless, those still bound by the fetters of the past would labor to defend their nation against the forces they feared would destroy it. The word of the mother. As Ishgard continued along the path toward restoration and reformation, the scattered Scions of the Seventh Dawn were gradually returning to the Rising Stones. Oh my goodness, I'm going to butcher this. Flamen? I know that's Y'shtola's mom. I just can never remember how to say her name. Bori Boulder and Kolionard, who had been forced to flee to Razid Han. Wait, they fled to Razid Han? Huh. I totally forgot they fled to Razid Han, of all places. I wish that was almost mentioned when you go to Razid Han in Endwalker, but anyway. Well, to flee to Razid Han following the Crystal Brave's betrayal enjoyed a heartfelt homecoming, while elsewhere, Cryle and Thancred conducted an investigation which they hoped would lead them to Minfilia. At the site of the antecedent's disappearance in the Sildan aqueducts, the pair identified a unique etheric signature which they believed was associated with Hydaelyn's intercessories. intercessions. Oh my goodness. Though it was something of a logical leap at the time, they surmised that Hydaelyn may have guided Minfilia into the compass of Y'shtola's flow, and then summoned her body and soul into a realm within the ethereal sea. Operating on this assumption, the Scions concluded that their search must continue in that near mythical place. Fortunately, the Sharlayan colonists had built a structure to study the ethereal sea, the Antitower. With the blessing of Matoya, its custodian, the warrior of light, descended into the deepest depths of the tower, and from there was summoned to the ethereal sea, where he was reunited with Minfilia. But Minfilia was much changed, speaking at times with her own voice, and at others with Hydaelyn's voice. She recounted her escape, how she hearkened to her fading voice, and made to her an offering of her own flesh. In so doing, she'd become one with Hydaelyn. The word of the mother, as she called herself, then revealed to the warrior of light the truth which lay at the heart of their world. Once, in a time before time, light and dark dwelt as one within the ethereal sea. Yet Zodiark coveted more power, and in gaining it, disrupted the balance, forcing Hydaelyn, in an act of self-preservation, to banish him from the distant heavens as a moon bound. Oh, to the distant heavens as a moon bound. Yet, not only was the star sundered in so doing, but the barriers between the realities as well, giving birth to 13 reflections of the source, 13 separate worlds. To restore Zodiark to his former glory did the Ascians ever labor, and each calamity, each ardor, marked a rejoining, the obliteration of a reflection, and a triumph of the dark. 7 times had this come to pass, 7 worlds rejoined, yet their ether returned to the source, and the darkness stronger for it. With a final desperate plea, the word bade the warrior of light bring an end to the Ascians' machinations, before shattering into 1,000 pieces before his very eyes. I gotta replay that cutscene at some point. I gotta replay that at some point. Also, I just realized one of my van braces was coming loose for some reason, but it's now fixed. Anyway. Yes, the famous line in all the Final Fantasy games. For those we can yet save, that becomes more important as you go farther in the game's story. The warrior of light and his companions knew not what to make of this incredible tale of the world's genesis, or of Minfilia's choice to sacrifice her everything to see it shared. Before they went their separate ways, they resolved to keep silent on the matter, if only for a time. Meanwhile, in Ishgard, Sir Emmerich sought to take advantage of the recent shift in public sentiment toward the Dravanians by hosting a peace conference in Falcon's Nest. Alas, preparations had to be suspended for a time, when a protest in the hamlet turned violent, casting a pall over the proceedings. Yet Sir Emmerich would not be deterred from his course. He announced that Ishgard would host a grand melee to commemorate the nation's recent return to the Eorzean alliance, as well as strengthen ties between the neighboring city-states. More importantly, however, it would provide an opportunity for Ishgard, as a nation built on centuries of warfare, to reaffirm their identity and take pride in their achievements, that they might be moved to common purpose once more. As hoped, the grand melee proved a rousing success. The peace conference in Falcon's Nest was reconvened, and there, during the unveiling of a relief celebrating the union of Saint Shiva and Hraesvelgr, Sir Emmerich and Vidofnir came together and spoke of peace. The dream endured for all of an instant. Without warning, Estinian leapt down from on high and drove his lance into Vidofnir's back, the white dragon's blood painting the relief a deep red. As the dragon collapsed, Sir Emmerich seized a bow and loosed an arrow at his friend's heart, duty guiding his hand. The dragoon had naught to fear from worldly weapons, however, swatting the deadly shaft and regaining his perch atop a nearby tower. All present strained to see the man who once embodied Ishgard's defense. But when he spoke, it was not with the voice of a man, but a worm, Nidhogg. The wrathful shade declared that the final chorus of the dragon song war was nigh, and that all would soon answer for their sins. Throwing wide his arms and letting forth a bestial roar, He then transformed into his draconic form and took wing to the distant skies. And that is also one of the first parts in the entire game. You actually hear the Heavensward theme, and it's like the post-Heavensward patches. It's so funny. But it is where you actually get the conclusion of the Dragon Song more, and also some awesome artwork. Including one of the most famous artwork pieces of all of Heavensward, which I have seen everywhere. Actually, I think this is the actual cover art of Heavensward too. But, yep. And also, my favorite part of Heavensward, and still my favorite trial, one of my top 10 trials in the game. Anyway, Revenge of the Horde. The conference held at Falcon's Nest was intended to celebrate the reconciliation between man and dragon, but the lingering shade of Nidhogg, clad in the flesh of the Azure Dragoon, marked the occasion by spilling the blood of his own kind, a timely atrocity to remind the children of Ishgard that the conflict was far from over. The Trials of Hraesvelgr. Nidhogg's words left no doubt the final course was nigh, and soon the Dravanian horde would be at the city's gates. Now that the worm was possessed of both of his eyes, Sir Emmerich concluded that there was only one being capable of standing against the vengeful shade, Nidhogg's own brother, Hraesvelgr. The Lord Commander bade the Warrior of Light and Alphino escort him to Zenith, and aid him in contacting the Great Worm to stand with Ishgard. Though he was well aware of Hraesvelgr's previous refusal to involve himself in the affairs of men, Sir Emmerich declared that if there was even a chance the dragon might be swayed, he must plead his case. And plead his case he did, when Hraesvelgr descended from the clouds to meet with them at Zenith. Alas, as before, the dragon greeted the request for his intervention with scorn. Despite Hraesvelgr's prestations of spent faith, however, Alphino firmly believed that he still nurtured the smallest flame of hope, for why else would he consent to bear Ysale upon his back? Nevertheless, the Great Worm would not even consider their proposal until Midgardsormr himself appeared to remind his son that Nidhogg was but a shade, and that he would do well to ponder his course, lest it lead him unto greater remorse. Thus convinced, Hraesvelgr declared that he would put the Warrior of Light and his companions to the test. Within the ruins where Retataskar once dwelled, the three weathered the trials of the Great Worm, who at last pledged them his aid in the coming battle with Nidhogg. I forgot that was the ruins where that initially happened. Interesting. See, lore I didn't know, or I did know and I forgot. Battle between kin. Shortly thereafter, a thunderous roar roared across the sky, signaling the advance of the Dravanian horde. The time had come for the final reckoning with Nidhogg, to bring an end to the wrathful song. The Warrior of Light and his companions settled upon the backs of Hraesvelgr and his kin, and dove through the clouds in the direction of Ishgard. On the steps of faith, the battle had already begun. The temple knights and the companies of the high houses were fighting valiantly to hold back the Dravanian horde, but in the face of the never-ending onslaught, they began to falter. One by one they started to fall, and when a massive feathered dragon was sighted on the western horizon, all hope was nearly lost, only for it to be restored when Hraesvelgr and his brethren delivered the Warrior of Light, Sir Emmerich, and Alphino to the bridge. With a mixture of surprise and scorn, Nidhogg welcomed Hraesvelgr, who attempted in vain to persuade his brother from his vengeful course. A mighty clash then ensued between the pair, from which there would only be one victor. The city's defenders watched transfixed as the two dragons tumbled to the bridge, their bodies obscured by rolling clouds of smoke and ash. When at last the haze cleared, Nidhogg stood over the recumbent body of his brother, a severed feathered wing gripped in between its teeth. Triumphant, Nidhogg reveled in that moment, only to learn that his falling sibling had entrusted the Warrior of Light with a gift, an eye, and with it one half of his power. With it, the adventure became Ishgard's best and last hope of slaying the rampaging Nidhogg. The Great Worm's shade was a fearsome foe consumed by a thousand years of vengeance. However, the Warrior of Light too was a force to be reckoned with, infused with the might of Hraesvelgr and filled with an otherworldly determination. Thus empowered, he subdued Nidhogg's shade and restored Estinian to his full form, or to his original form. Though weakened, the virulent spirit still held the dragoon in its thrall, commanding him to slay his companions. In that instant, Estinian, marshaling his strength, restrained the beasts within and cried out for them to slay him. But Alphinaud, the warrior of light, would do no such thing, and instead made to rest the worm's eyes from Estinian's armor. Using every ounce of their strength, they wrestled with the hateful things, arcs of crackling ether coursing through their bodies, leaving them in agony. Yet just when the feat seemed beyond them, the memories of the lost gave them newfound strength, and with one final heave they succeeded in separating man and worm. For an instant they glimpsed Nidhogg's disembodied spirit depart, before they cast his eyes into the abyss, which no one would ever claim again. I wish. So it was that Astinia was saved, and with him the nation of Ishgard. An end to the song. I still love this artwork, by the way. It's so good. The battle was over. Having witnessed their brood father, Shade, return to the ether, the Dravanians loyal to Nidhogg withdrew. Upon the scorched and crumbling bridge, countless bodies of man and dragon lay motionless. Yet for all they had endured, the city still stood. At long last, Sir Emmerich was free to abolish the 1,000-year rule of the archbishops, and pave the way for a new republic. In the days that followed, Ishgard's governance was placed in the hands of a newly formed House of Commons and House of Lords, whose members would be elected from all levels of society. Alas, though Sir Emmerich de Boreal wanted nothing more than to lay down the reins of state, he soon found himself elected in the highest seat in the House, or in the Lords. In the House of Lords, anyway. Though at first he strove to refuse this honor, the Count de Duriandir, well aware of public sentiment, pressured him to accept. For Ishgard was changing, and the people yearned for fair and equitable representation, and there were none better suited to stand at the forefront of the movement than he. So it was that the winds of gentle revolution came to stir. Prominent among the many honored guests at Sir Emmerich's investiture were the ambassadors of Dragonkind, Vidofnir and two dragons. I'm not going to try to do this. A symbol of Ishgard's newfound peace. At the ceremony's climax, Vidofnir once more bore Sir Emmerich upon his back, and the people looked on in awe as they soared through the heavens. By their cheers did they hail an azure dragoon for a new age. Yet Estinian, who had played host to Nidhogg's blade, would no longer consent to bear the mantle of Azure Dragoon. His hunt is at an end. He quietly slipped away from the sickbed and disappeared from the annals of history. Ah. Or he tried to, anyway. The final page. Whither the keys? Wait a minute. I thought there was more to Post Heavensward, or am I confused? Maybe it's just not included in this book. The year 15... Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Huh. Okay, this is totally... Yeah. This is totally separate from... Huh. What is this? Okay, this is like a random extra lore bit that's just like kind of just in here. Huh. Okay. Yeah, this has nothing to do with like the... I'm surprised they didn't have more for Post Heavensward in here. I'm gonna be honest. It must be because it spoils so much of future content that they put it in later books, I'm guessing. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah, no. Alright, we're gonna read this and end with this. Whither the keys? The year 1562 of the Sixth Astral Era did not lack for events of great historical import. The Battle of Silvertear Sky is first and foremost among them. Let us examine a few less prominent series of conflicts that broke out elsewhere in the realm in the shadow of that epic struggle. Of horns and primals. Tube Samati is the legendary staff, right here, wielded by the Archon Louis Sois in his heroic effort to banish the Elder Primal Bahamut. At its tip rests a horn, an ancient treasure of Charlene known as the Key, the motive force that allows its bearer to draw vast quantities of ether from its surroundings and call upon the powers of the 12 themselves. While it is not clear who fashioned this divine vessel, and to what end, it is believed that multiple such artifacts have been discovered in secret across the realm. In the year 1562, travelers from the Charlene motherland to the north did come to Eorzea. Archons in the Circle of Knowing, they arrived on these shores after a long voyage and promptly set forth for Limsel, Minsa, Gridania, Ul'dah, and Ishgard, where they began to solidify a foundation to fight back against the Garlean threat. It was these Archons who had come upon the curious horns in the lands that they came to survey. In Vilbrand, near concurrently with Archon Y'shtola's arrival, a pirate of the Kraken Arms successfully navigated his way to the legendary island of Seal Rock, where he discovered two relics, a horn and a tablet, the former of which, through a dubious series of events, found its way into the hands of Commodore Salman? I hope I'm saying that right. Of the Knights of the Barracuda. The Commodore had set his sights on the oh my goodness, and doubtless believed that the horn would serve him in his goals. I believe this is all 1.0 stuff right here, by the way. I'm wondering why this wasn't mentioned earlier. They must have tagged this on last minute anyway. In the end, however, it proved beyond his powers to control. Archon Y'shtola made a valiant effort to retrieve the artifact, only to be thwarted by an Ascian by the name of Travinchet, who seized the coveted relic for himself. Yeah, I seem to remember this being in 1.0 from research I did on 1.0. Ere long, the wrath of the Primals came to Vilbrand. The Kobolds called forth the fearsome Titan, Lord of the Crags, and the Sahagins summoned the mighty Leviathan, Lord of the World. The timing of these events is not like to be mere coincidence. Further shedding light on these happenings, recent studies have revealed that Seal Rock is not a natural landmass as long believed, but rather an artificial island constructed by the ancient Allegan Empire, one which housed a faculty for conducting research on the anti-primal weapon Omega. That the horn was retrieved from such a place would suggest an undeniable connection between the relic and primals. Meanwhile, in Thanalan, a confederacy of youths proposed that of the sons of the Confederacy of youths composed of the sons of influential Ul'dah personages. Oh my goodness, these words. And motivated by political grievances, purloined a horn-shaped relic from the secret vaults of the Sultanate. They put the item in the hands of a mammoth surrounding it during the midst of a grand procession. Amongst the procession was a fearsome Gobu, tamed by thaumaturgical incantations to serve as a spectacle. For reasons unknown, the sound of the horn broke the spell, sending the beast into a violent rampage. Needless to say, the entire incident was a ruse. Hergenfar the Great, gladiator and ally to the conspirators, would swiftly put down the threat, earning the acclaim of the townspeople and winning further support for his compatriots' cause. The plan went awry, however, when a spectator was slain by the raging creature. In the ensuing confusion, the thaumaturge Corrigivis absconded with the horn. It was not long after that the Amalja succeeded in summoning Ifrit, Lord of the Inferno. Though the conspiring youths saw the horn merely as a tool to send monstrous creatures into a rampage, research conducted by the Archon Thancreds paints a different picture. As the horn was sounded, there was a massive fluctuation in the surrounding ether, suggesting a connection between the horn and the relic discovered on Seal Rock. Likewise, the thaumaturge Corgravius was most likely the assumed form of an Ascian. That the Ascians coveted the horns as a means to foment chaos through the primals, so as to further their dark plot of bringing about a calamity, this much is clear. As for why these strange relics emerged at nearly the same time across distant lands, however, remains a mystery. And then it has drawings of the horn and tablet fragments, and obviously the final staff. That is cool. That is all like prequel 1.0 stuff. That's kind of cool. Although, why is it here? Why is this here and not like pages ago when we were reading stuff in chronological order? That's weird. Anyway, cool. Not what I expected to end with, but next time we get to something I am very much looking forward to, which is reading about the different races in the game. Yay! I've been looking, in the words of a certain Star Wars character, I've been looking forward to this. But anyway, everybody, that concludes today's episode of Ranger Readings. Thank you all for coming out to another episode of my horrible reading skills. Thank you, thank you. And yeah, next time we'll be reading more of the Book of Genesis in the Bible, and also reading about the races in Final Fantasy XIV. So very much excited about that. That will be 2 Wednesdays from now, so make sure you tune in for that. Hopefully, if I'm remembering my schedule correctly. But yeah, so that will be a few Wednesdays for now. And yeah, and my next stream will be Friday afternoon in between my work shifts, which this is the only week I can do that because I have a lot of craziness with my job that's preventing me from even being home during my normal break. But on Friday, I will hopefully have that break, and I will use that to react to the Wuthering Waves live stream for 3.1, which I am super excited about because Amieth and Giant Mech Girl, and it's going to be so cool. And yeah, absolute cinema strikes yet again. Really excited about that. So yeah, that will be Friday, and then on Saturday, we have Total War, but not just Total War, because last minute, we have a collab announcement. I will be collabing with Kai on Saturday in Helldivers before we start Total War. And that will be chaos, and very entertaining for all of you, so look forward to that. But for now, thank you all for tuning into another stream. And without further ado, let's find someone to raid! If I can do this correctly.